Welcome to the Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty Gensius, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and host for Circular Firing Squad. Tonight, we've got 5 members, 5 questions, and 5 answers for each question. Questions are generated by each squad member and run from the profound to the provocative. Everybody's with us tonight except Jen. Jen was a little concerned. She was going to get her second shot for vaccination today and was wondering how she would handle it. And I just got a text message before the show. Maybe it's the shot, maybe it's not, but she's pretty wiped out and wanted to check out tonight. So hope she's feeling better. We'll catch her on the next time. We've got a doppelganger show that we've been knocking around, the idea that finding substitute squad members for each of us. And it came from a time that I was talking to my daughter about the show, and she started answering one of the questions, and I thought, my God, that's me answering the question. And so I posed it to the squad and said, let's do a doppelganger show. So my daughter's going to be sitting in a couple of weeks. I think it's April 11th. We're recording it. Come out sometime after that because we're not going to do it live stream for new folks. But she will kind of host and sit in the chair for me. And Elliott, you have your son.
Yes, my son, my 18-year-old Brady, he will be sitting in for me.
And Eric, who have you got?
My wife will be sitting in for me. Which is interesting because she's less my doppelganger and more the bizarro version of me, I guess.
So it's the alternate Eric universe?
I mean, she's funnier, much more likable, and she has a background in radio. So she's really pumped to do it. This is kind of her thing.
And then Gina, you've got someone picked out?
Yes, it's my sister. She is my real life doppelganger. So everyone always comments that we look like twins. So you'll all get to see the striking resemblance there.
And Steph is still working on hers. And Jen was talking about somebody last week, but we'll wait to hear from her again in terms of that. But that'll be coming out after April 11th. It'll be a doppelganger show. And it comes close to our anniversary, our 1-year anniversary. One of the things I started to do with the last episode was you can go through the notes section of your app on the show, and you can find out when certain questions are asked, who asked them, and again, what time they start. So if you want to capture and see what other questions are asked during the show, you can get that in the show notes now. Let's do a roll call, all right?
Hi, everyone. I'm Gina Martin, and I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Iowa. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Northwestern University and co-host of Supervision Time.
Hi, everybody. Elliott Ingersoll. I'm a professor of counseling at Cleveland State University and co-host of Apply Topically.
Hi, I'm Steph Martyr, a doctoral candidate at Kent State University, practicing clinical counselor and co-host of Grad School Deconstructed.
Hi, everyone. Eric Perry. I'm a clinical faculty member at Southern New Hampshire University and co-host of the Tech Savvy Professor.
And Gina has the first question for tonight.
My first question is, what is your least favorite therapist line or saying?
My first response was, of course, what I would consider an error, which would be, how does that make you feel? But that's more of a training thing. I think my least favorite therapist saying that I heard in recent years was, consuming wine will exacerbate your depression. I said, pharmacologically, I agree. Existentially, I'll take the risk.
I don't know. I think that certain phrases that have come on with good intentions, even through pop culture, have gotten twisted in some sense. I don't know. Maybe it's just in certain worlds, but maybe that idea of, I don't know. I really had a hard time coming up with something, but I was thinking speaking your truth, or that is my truth. Someone just saying that, I'm not sure. I think people use it as a justification to do and behave however they want to, or without necessarily taking it further. I think, though, that it's become extra overused, like I said, in those ways. And it really became exemplified through watching The Bachelor. So it's just that's my answer there. Just kind of people saying that they're speaking their truths.
So for me, it drives me a little nutty, and I understand why folks do it, but it's the sounds like. Every other phrase is sounds like you're saying, sounds like you mean, sounds like, and it becomes this like broken record check-in for the client. And in some ways, it bothers me because it shows kind of a lack of confidence at a certain point from the counselor in hearing what the client has to say and being able to, articulate that. And I think if you can't paraphrase, summarize, reflect feeling, the types of skills, that those basic kind of micro skills that we use in a way that you don't need to qualify that, you're not confident enough yet. And it becomes this cliche thing that starts to really tear at my eardrums. And, it gets to this same kind of permission seeking type things that early counselors will do. They'll say, instead of asking a question, they'll say, can you tell me about, right? This kind of making this open question that they want to phrase closed. And it's really about their own kind of insecurities there. And I really want them to be confident and be that strong presence for the client. I'm not saying it's terrible or awful all the time, but it can become this really kind of repetitious place that they go to and everything sounds like.
I can't believe no one's gotten to these yet. I started a list only because I thought by the time it got down to me, y'all would have chosen some of these. What I hear you saying drives me nuts. Take some cleansing breaths. And at that point, I feel I'm manipulated. Along with that, close your eyes and imagine yourself on a beach. But I think the one that tops it all is journey. When a person's and everybody's on a journey, didn't have to pay for tickets, didn't have to get a booking agent, didn't have to get on a flight. Journey. For me, when somebody says that, no, I'm not on a journey. I'm living my damn life. So journey, I think, tops it all.
Mine is thank you for sharing. It really gets to me. It's one of my least favorite sayings that therapists will say. And the reason for it is much like all of you have said, right? There's lack of confidence. These things start to get to you. You say the same things over and over again. So you all know I've worked in a lot of trauma with children and adolescents. And I think one of the worst things that you can say to someone after they've just revealed a deep trauma, something that's a very deep-seated core belief, something that's very authentic to them, they're bearing their soul, and the therapist responds, thank you for sharing. That cuts off the conversation, that puts the emotions to a screeching halt, and it lets the client know that this person has no idea what to do with their emotions. They have no idea what to do with their trauma. So it's that response of thank you for sharing that really gets to me. So Elliott, I think you have the next question.
I believe so. Yeah. Do you think our society is collectively losing its mind? And I'm using, as Jen would say, air quotes. Why or why not? Steph.
So what came to mind were some lyrics from this Harvey Danger song called Flagpole Sitta. That's like 20 years old. That's been around the world and only stupid people are breeding. And I feel like it's because we're outnumbered now exponentially. So if that were true, that was true 20 years ago. Now, I mean, exponentially, it's over. So I feel like maybe I don't know. The number of clients I have suggests so. People kind of come in, but I think that really there is some some sanity. I think that there is, but I feel like the pull is getting weaker and weaker. The return, every time there's like a pull away, it's harder to get back and get to be grounded again. So I guess, yes, I think so. And that was my reason. Eric.
I tend to not be one who like throws rays of sunshine for folks. I at the same time, I think it's okay. I think there's some things coming out. There's some battles being fought. There's awareness happening. There's struggle that I'm hoping leads us to somewhere productive. I always go back to this, that there has to be conflict. There has to be trouble, for us to make any movement as a society. It doesn't happen in stillness. So, yeah, I think there is some folks losing their minds. I think there's some being really challenged by what's happening and happened recently. And in some ways, I think that may change things for the better. I think I'm still waiting for the craziness to settle to see what that becomes, to determine whether or not it's a productive losing, it's a productive loss of everyone's collective mind, right? So I guess I sit a little bit in the middle. Marty?
I think what we're doing is finding the extremes. And I heard somebody talk about this one time when it was about metaphysical counseling, metaphysical psychology, and getting involved in kind of the metaphysical aspects of spiritual aspects of this, is that there's a pendulum, and socially and culturally we'll swing from one end of the pendulum that has sort of all of the unknown and all of the metaphysical, I keep using that word, deep spatial kinds of things, to some of the more concrete, conservative, structured, rigid sorts of worlds. And what happens is, as you swing more in one direction, the swing back is even further in the other direction. And for that reason, it feels like it's getting crazier, that the pendulum's hitting more of the extremes each time it swings back and forth. So my answer is, yes, it's always been there. It's just we're getting to see it now.
So I took this question in a little bit of a different way tonight. And I have to say that, yes, everyone is losing their minds because we've all been stuck inside for a year. We're coming up on the anniversary of this pandemic. And I think that has caused a lot of people to collectively lose their minds. But jumping off of what everyone else has said tonight, too, I think that I agree with Eric that I have to fall somewhere in the middle, right? There's progress being made. It's also at what cost? So that's my answer, both.
Now, these are helpful to me because this is something I do struggle with. I feel like, yeah, we've got a Paleolithic mind brain in a postmodern society, and yeah, I'm a baby boomer curmudgeon, and I think the screens are really whacking everyone's attention out. And in that sense, though, I really like Marty. I liked your response, and it reminded me of the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who just said in Antiodromia, and he used the same pendulum analogy: the farther it swings one way, it'll swing back the other way. It's really hard to live through for me some days, but I guess they were screeching about masks in the pandemic in 18, so maybe, yeah, we were just seeing it more clearly. And then the other part of me goes back to Eastern cosmology and the Kalpa. There's 4 periods, and like God, the creator of the universe, plays hide and seek with herself. And so there is the one consciousness, unity, and then she plays hide and seek with herself for bajillion years. And the last period, the last yuga that we're supposedly in, is called Kali Yuga. Kali from the the goddess of destruction or deconstructing. And in that, everything falls apart. And I'm like, I remember going through this the first few times and being really attracted to it and then thinking, oh, you're getting too philosophical. But now I'm almost like, gee, that's as good an explanation as any. So I think we are. And I don't know that it's irreparable. I don't know that it's cosmological, but I'm certainly open to all the possibilities, which is not a lot of help, I know. Anyway, next question goes to Stephanie.
All right. Climb out of the rabbit hole and are climbing. We're all climbing. So my question is, what theory do you experience the most values dissonance with, and does it change how you teach it?
Shouldn't be a shock to many. For me, is always classic Freud, right? I think there are students that come in and really kind of romanticize this idea of Freud. And I think they do it in a way that they don't have a really good handle on what contemporary psychodynamics are. You know, they just have this vision of what therapy looks like in popular culture. And, I think I spend a lot of time dispelling what that is and what that means. And even some of the pop culture references that aren't even close to what Freud would have done or Freud would have thought. So that one, I think, brings me so much further away from teaching it or thinking about it in a way that it has practical application. I think I spend a lot of time compensating for that and speaking of it as more of in a historical context, and really spending a lot of time on, what contemporary psychodynamics look like. What are some of the, other theories that have branched off from his work, not to negate the importance of it, but that it did a lot of damage to the field, I believe, in a lot of ways. But those kind of other branch off theories like object relations and Lacanian psychoanalysis, and there's other historical theories that have really come away from this with very different vantage points that are interesting from a historical context. But I think the biggest thing is separating practice and what is historical, what is contemporary, what is evidence based, and kind of what that looks like. So that kind of classic Freud for me.
Boy, this was a tough question for me because I'm glad Eric talked about Freud, because I think we have some similar understanding and experience of that with students. Students come in with some really crazy ideas about what Freud was, and that shapes their perception. But I think, the answer to that question for me is the last part of it. How does it change how you teach it? So it's the theories I have a really hard time teaching are the ones that I experience the most dissonance with. I would say cognitive behavioral. Right now I'm teaching a family therapy class, and I have had a hell of a time trying to demonstrate cognitive behavioral therapy with a family and not feeling like a fraud. So I would say the same thing with solution focused. And there are those who would argue solution focused isn't a theory, it's a technique. It doesn't work for me. I continue to teach it. I've given workshops, day-long workshops on it in Turkey. But I feel like a bit of a fraud because I would never use that as a form of practice because it seems too artificial and it seems too programmy in the process. So solution focused, I think, would be the one that I find the most difficulty with.
So I'm going to jump off of what Marty said. For me, it's CBT. And the reason, again, goes back to my clinical experience working with children and adolescents who've experienced trauma. I can challenge cognitive distortions all day, but that doesn't get at the underlying root of what's actually happening. And it doesn't process any of the deep emotions that are lurking under the surface, which is why I turn to a more psychodynamic lens, which again, psychodynamic, far different than Freud. And I think that that's something that is, a big myth within our field, that the more contemporary psychodynamic stuff and object relations, and even going back to like attachment theory and Winnicott and all that. I think there's a whole lot more truth to that, or gravity with those types of theories in clinical practice than with CBT. It seems very surface level to me. And so coming to teaching with that, I think it changes the way that I teach that in that, is it useful? Do I find value in challenging cognitive distortions? Absolutely. Is that everything that I'm going to do? Probably not. I used to work with one therapist who that was all she did for every single client ever was CBT worksheets. And I just could not work that way. So for me, it's CBT.
What stood out for me is I'm teaching personality theories this semester, and I give the students some choices because personality theories are not heavily covered on the NCE. And so I give them a range of modules that we can do, but they almost always want me to cover Carl Jung. And I have studied the collected works. I've read them all at least twice. Even coming out of a theology background, I've got so many problems with a lot of his work because he changes his voice depending on who he's speaking to. And I guess, to be fair, I would probably do that if I was speaking to physicians. I would take a more scientific approach. If I was speaking to lay people, I might go more into the, as we have called it, the ooky spooky spiritual stuff. But I keep going through this, and I was rereading his the notes on his seminar about dream interpretation, and I'm like, this guy would never get published today. Oh, he might get published in a pop psychology press, but a lot of the pieces parts just never come back around. When you read about the syzygy, this is supposed to be some alchemical high point, and I'm like, yeah, it's not really, Carl. But he didn't have a lot of people telling him otherwise, so it does affect the way I teach it, because I think most of what I teach, I always ask the students to take a kind of postmodern critical analysis of it. And that's probably true for everything, but I think there's a lot more meat on the bone with Carl Jung.
I realized after having to answer this question myself that it was really difficult. It seemed like such a good question when I'm running, and I'm thinking about this for myself. It was more of an introspective kind of thing, I suppose, but I definitely identify with a lot of those answers going to some of those Freudian concepts. And it's more about aspects of theories than maybe entire theories for me. And what I think it would change how I teach it. Just in the sense of, if you have a different relationship with it, different relationships with different theories is going to change the way that you relate to the material. And that's going to change how it kind of gets taught, even if you don't really recognize it, even if you kind of hit all of the same check boxes for every single theory. It's just going to be a little different. And I'll just have to, you just have to adjust for that, I suppose, and just do your best, but I appreciate all of those answers.
Right. So I believe I have the next question. Shifting gears a little bit. What is your go-to self-care snack?
Everything I eat is my go-to self-care snack. That's what my doctor would say, that I probably, what is self-care? I'm stuffing my face with crap I shouldn't eat. So, but I'm taking care of myself in the process, but it's certainly not healthy. I thought about this one and I thought, okay, so what truly is when I want to gear down and settle into something? It's soup. I grew up in a family. My mother was a child of the Depression, so there wasn't a bone or piece of grizzle that didn't get turned into soup eventually in our household. So I got to observe her make lots of different kinds of soup out of remnants from previous evening's meals. And from that grew to a real appreciation and a lot of consumption of soup. So if I want to have a meal that's not too heavy, if I want something that I can relax and enjoy, I will, sometimes I'll use canned soup, but I often doctor it up. So I'm kind of throwing in some extra celery and other things like that. So if it really has to be self-care and the snack has to be defined by that, and for me that means healthy, it's going to be soup.
For me, it's gas station cake pops. And this has a story behind it. So I live in Iowa, and there is a Casey's gas station here. And one time we were traveling to Des Moines from Iowa City, which is about a 2-hour drive, and we had to stop for gas. And I just picked up one of their cake pops on a whim because it was a stressful drive. We have a 2-year-old. She wasn't sleeping. It was, the works. So I grabbed this cake pop, intending to eat it at a later time, but ate it during that car ride because it was so stressful. And it was hands down the best cake pop I have ever had. So I went to all of the Casey's in my area to try to find these. And I will buy all of them when I find them. That I began to get a reputation amongst the Casey's, the people who work there. And my husband actually went in one the other day to find one for me, to surprise me, to bring me one of these gas station cake pops because I hadn't had one in a while. And he asked the lady at the checkout counter if she had seen any cake pops recently. And she said, no, it's so funny. There was this lady who came in and she used to come to all the Casey's looking for these cake pops, and she would buy like 10 of them. And he was like, oh my gosh, I know her. And he just left and was kind of mortified. And so that is my favorite go-to self-care snack. I had one earlier today, right before hopping on the show. So that's my go-to.
That's a good one. I mean, I kind of took this two ways. When I'm having a really bad day and I'm crying on the couch watching Stanley Kubrick movies, I'm going to eat a pint of Haagen-Dazs, and I'll do it, and I will feel better. And it's like, okay, I got to count the workouts. How am I going to work that off? Blah, blah, blah. But then when I think of real self-care, it's like my partner and I, it's like preparing as much food at the beginning of the week and putting it in mason jar servings. So I have a stovetop chili with lean beef, black beans, all kinds of vegetables, seared, So there's kind of two. There's one I think is the emotional health care when I'm just breaking down and I need Haagen-Dazs. And then the other one is like, okay, I'm planning my week and I'm going to try to eat as healthy as I can. That'll be the stovetop chili.
I didn't even include a healthy option. I have 2 unhealthy options. When I'm sick or injured, Jelly Bellies. I mean, really Jelly Bellies all the time. Jelly Bellies make everything better. It's true. But for this question, the first thing originally that came to mind was the fact that, first of all, I like interactive food. I like food that I do stuff with, whether it's fajitas or I don't know. But one thing is like I have to buy my own ice cream in the house because while ice cream is great, I like ice cream that I can pick stuff out of, that I can go fishing for. I can get the little peanut butter cups, or then I can like get this big chunk of the swirl that's mixed in. Mike doesn't appreciate the way I eat ice cream, and so I have to get my own, but I really like the process. It's like my own little Zen garden of goodness. It's relaxing, and it also makes me feel good to eat it.
I got to throw a caveat in on the Haagen-Dazs thing. So my son, who he can't keep weight on to save his life. So I introduced him to Haagen-Dazs when he was like 4 and he loved it. But he's like me, doppelganger. He only likes there's nothing to pick out. And he'll go to the store now. And then, of course, a week later, he'll be like, Dad, did you eat that pint of Haagen-Dazs in the deep freeze? And I'm like, yeah, you didn't have your name on it. So now he puts his name on the Haagen-Dazs. And I'm like, that's the way to do it.
I've been waiting for this moment. I want to thank you all for sharing. In my response, so my mother, she can't cook, and it's a pretty well-known fact. And we often give her a hard time about this dinner she made once. And she came home tired from work, single mother, nobody there but myself, her, and my brother. And she decides to go with a quick meal, and she's going to make grilled cheese. And she goes in, runs in, makes it tomato soup. We all sit down, we go to eat. She forgot a critical component of that grilled cheese, and that was the cheese. So we always remind her of the time she made us grilled cheeseless for dinner. So oftentimes grilled cheese is one of the things that I'll go to as my self-care snack. Either that or peanut butter and jelly and chocolate milk. That's the thing I run to in the middle of the night if I wake up and I'm really hungry. It's always chocolate milk and peanut butter and jelly.
I think I've got the next question. Do you keep your books?
So I do keep my books. I've kept every book from my master's program. I've kept every book from my PhD. And you can't tell. So I have a small bookshelf here, but in my office at Iowa, where I haven't been allowed in for over a year now, which is sad to be apart from my books, I have a bookshelf that spans the wall, and it's just packed with all of my books from the past 6 years now. So I do hold on to them.
So here's where I can give a contrast developmentally in what an occupational hazard this can be. Because yeah, Gina, like you, I have kept my books. Books are, sacred. And up until August, I had the chairperson's office, which had a lot more wall space. And my son and I built a whole floor to ceiling shelf to hold everything. When I moved out of that, I was like, oh, we're going to have to let go of some of these. And it was horrible. I have my favorites, which I just never let go of. And as an author, I look back on them. I look at them as references, and certain things I will go through forever. But there were a bunch that there were outdated editions. And my daughter, who is very good at, what's the phrase? Shock and awe cleaning. She came down and helped me. And I'd set them out and nobody wanted them. We couldn't think of anywhere to donate them. And we threw them out. And it was like about 400 books. And there were thousands left. Don't think I was like, running without books. But it was like, yeah, we just chucked them because we didn't know what else to do. I felt like a Nazi. It was horrible. Some of my favorites I also were able to give away to colleagues. My colleague, Professor Stephanie Durkar, when she teaches something, she does a deep dive. And she does our lab and counseling skills. And she's kind of deconstructed a lot of Alan Ivy's work. And I had this book. It's this thick. It's from the 70s. And it's like an Alan Ivy Basics of Micro Skills in Counseling. And it's a hardcover. And on the back, it's got a picture of him in a plaid jacket with a rotary phone held up to his head. And I was like, oh, you've got to have this. So I could gift a lot of them, people like that. But yeah, I want to hang on to them. I wish that magically, as I got older, my bookshelf space just would keep growing, but that just doesn't happen.
I want to get you like one of those pods or something, Elliott, so you can like just have some extra storage right there. I also keep my books. I have my books from undergrad, and then my first run at grad school, and then my second like 12 years later. Yeah. And actually I've used some of them, a few of them to my surprise. Luckily, some of the most useful ones were the statistics ones, because luckily like those don't really change, at least, some of that basic stuff. But I am always afraid there's something really important that I'm going to need that's in one of those books. And I'm finally, for a little while now, I just packed up recently enough all of the books. I had a brief stint with law school and stuff, and I finally just packed up all of my law books like 15 years later, because I finally kind of reconciled that I will not be needing them moving forward. But it took a while. It took a long time. So but I love my books. I will always hang on to them as long as I can.
So I feel comfortable enough to share that I feel like I have a strange relationship with books in a lot of ways. I have, 3 editions of the same assessment textbook, successive editions. The first one I used in grad school, the second one in my doctoral program, and the third one just came out. And I had a question from a friend. He's like, why do you keep all 3? And I said, well, there's memories attached to these, it's updated, but like when I look back at that first edition I have, there's my notes from grad school, and then there's notes from my doc program. And, I'm never going to use the content in the earlier editions, right? Maybe there's something pulled out that I might like that I wish was in the newer edition or whatever, but I think a lot of times I'm attached to it for different reasons, other than academic. I like to have them knowing that I have them and there's memory attached to them. So over on my bookshelf, under my coffee pot, I have 3 editions of the same assessment textbook um, that are completely unnecessary just because it every now and then gives me a bit of nostalgia. So yeah, I hang on to my textbooks quite a bit, but less for academic purposes than just for me.
Wow. What a bunch of freaks. You all hold on to your textbooks. Huh?
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, no, I do too. And that was where this question was coming from. I was clearing off the shelf behind me that you can't see because I brought home a bunch of books from the office to get ready to teach, and I finished teaching that material. So I was going to take it back. And one of the books I was going to take back was a copy of Provocative Therapy by Frank Farley, who I purchased a long time ago. And I don't loan my books out to students. There are a few cases, and Stephanie is one of them, where I have loaned out a book knowing that it will come back. But she's looking for another. Oh, yeah, she has my Study in Behavior. And I know it will come back because this is what happened to my Frank Farley book. And I'm holding it up to.
It's mutilated.
It's mutilated. The student's dog ate it. Literally, the dog tore the cover off and digested the first chapter of Frank Farley's book, which is more than what most people can do. But I've got to say, the student sent me back a new copy of the book. It was cellophane, shrink wrapped, a brand new copy. I have 2 copies of this book, and this is one of them. And I had another copy, and she sent me what is now the 3rd copy of this book that I had. And, if she would have told me what had happened, I would have been, hey, that's cool. I got another copy of the book. That's funny. I got a dog that chews stuff up too. You don't need to do that because I know you're a grad student and you've got expenses. No big deal. I can manage it. But she, in further conversation, she's like, no, I needed to do this for my own karma. And I'm like, okay, I get that. You need to feel that it's back in balance. It's back in balance. But yeah, I keep all of my books, primarily my school books, pop culture books and things like that. Occasionally I'll finish and we'll try and find some place to get rid of them and clear it out. But yeah, I have books from back in 1983 when I was in my doc program because I had to sit with them. I had to go through them. They became those memories that all of you are talking about. Now that, and if I've put that much love into that book to read it, then it stays with me. With the change now and me getting everything digital, I don't have that same feeling. It doesn't occupy physical space in my world. So it's a little bit different. But my world is getting full of junk. So I've got to go that way. So that's all the questions for tonight. We've got a final shot question. The question is simply ketchup or mustard?
Ketchup.
And this is the last 5 years. Mustard, even for French fries.
I don't know about that, but mustard.
Mustard. Easy.
Man, I could never stand mustard. It's got to be ketchup on toast for breakfast, which is obviously more than what Eric got. I want to thank you all for joining us. And we have a great group here. Thanks to the squad, Elliott, Gina, Stephanie, Eric, and we hope to see Jen again soon. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on thepodtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. We have a new show coming up called Counseling Delphi, which will be video live streamed monthly on Sunday nights. Our first show is coming up Sunday, March 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The topic will be on distance counseling. And the live stream component will allow viewers to be able to submit questions for consideration of the panel Interested viewers are also encouraged to submit questions for the show through the website counselingdelphi, all one word, .net. Shows will be available for later viewing with real-time transcription, and the audio from the live stream will be converted to audio podcasts to be released to all major podcast services. So take a look at counselingdelphi.net for more information and more details about the show coming up. Our theme music is from Menage en Quad, Real Swing Shet. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Ready, fire, aim.